what the class action lawsuits mean for Wichita, Kansas real estate. So I'm going to get in and break this down on a real detailed version of it all, at least as much as we know to this point. But before we get into all that, please like, comment, subscribe, share so that you can stay informed, stay involved around Wichita, Kansas, what it's like to live here, what real estate is like here, and just really keep you informed, up to date, and be proactive for providing this professional level service that we do. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into that. I got an outline to respect your time and my time to be structured with this, but there's a few key things I want to break down and then give you some of my personal take on it, on where I see this affecting us or what you really need to be worried about or what you don't so much, to provide kind of some love and leadership and direction on this, because it's been unsettling somewhat, but in some ways not. Just trying to sort through a lot of the noise that comes with all this. But what it boils down to and comes down to is a lot more strict processes are going to be enforced. In a lot of ways, I think consumers will most likely begrudge these new rules. They're going to be come through because in a lot of ways, it makes an already complex, complicated situation even more complex and complicated. But it will also improve the amount of disclosures, transparency, understanding, explanation, so that we're going to be having a lot more thorough, detailed conversations like professionals around all of these things with signed documents, signed disclosures, so that there's no confusion on what's being agreed to, what's being said. Because I've seen this a lot in my career as a real estate agent, is there are a lot of verbal discussions and we think there's understanding and commitment and agreement. But then when we go to sign the document and write it out and agree to it, that's where things start to get more clearly defined. And when it's written and signed, that's really what goes into the court of law and what's understood. Doesn't matter what was said, what was perceived to happen. It's whatever's on paper that goes into a court of law is how this is handled with everything. And that's where, we're following the rules as professional real estate agents. We do things by the book like they're supposed to be. But I can't necessarily speak for all agents, all realtors out there. And I think this is somewhat where all of this is coming from on everything. One of the simplest phrases I've seen to describe this, to help people wrap their head around the situation, is that the seller agrees to pay the commissions outlined from the buyer's money and financing. So in regards to who's paying it, nothing's free. Nothing's ever been free. Any type of free word for advertising is misleading, is not entirely true. It's kind of false, and in some ways is enticement and not necessarily bribery, but nothing's free in this life. There's an exchange for everything. And I think that should be understood and explained. And if anybody's saying free, you got to take into account like what is the kind of the trick or the hook that goes with that. And I've always built my career on being transparent and straightforward and reliable and trustworthy. And I got into this industry not necessarily to make a bunch of easy money and be lazy. I got into it because I was working on houses, flipping houses, and I still flip houses. I still remodel houses. And I got into the industry to improve the service level as an agent, to do it myself, but then also to help other people experience a higher level of professional service for their needs, for their wants, for one of the most stressful, crazy, big times in their lives that on average people only do 7 to 10 years. So it's like, how well can we really be an expert at doing these processes when we only do them 7 to 10 years? And I know with the internet and the modern world, people think that they can do real estate in a lot better ways than they have before. But what they're coming to find is that's not entirely true. Because discount brokerages, flat fee brokerages, a lot of these less than stellar services have always been available, but you get what you pay for. And so that's a lot of the discussions we've been having around this. We may have to change the way we operate somewhat, but in a lot of ways you get what you pay for. Just like any other professional service provider, you would expect to pay them a fee. You would expect to pay them an amount, and there's variable levels with that. It's no different with real estate agent services. And so there's a certain level to get into the industry that has a license, but then from there, we can vary how much service level we provide and bring to the table, based on what the consumer and the client is wanting to get from us or see from us. So there are flat fee services. There's our services that can just throw it on MLS and hope it sells. And you kind of get what you pay for, and you might as well just be for sale by owner if that's what you're engaging in. Same thing with a lot of flat fee services. What we've seen is we've seen them come on our market and they just sit and you get what you pay for. Like I said, they don't necessarily have a marketing strategy. They don't have a sales strategy. They don't really know how to negotiate. And so that's why they're charging you less, because they're providing you way less. And that's appropriate. And that's fair. And I'm okay with that. I think the issue is there is too many agents charging 3% and 6%, and then providing a flat fee service or a discounted service, and the client was ultimately dissatisfied because thought they were getting full level service from a marketing, sales, and negotiating agent, when really they were just getting somebody who had a license and threw it on them less, or somebody had a license who was a friend and didn't know what they were doing. And so in a lot of ways, this will enhance the professionalism of our industry and hopefully the respect and the dignity of it, because it is a very noble profession. When you operate like a professional and you know what you're doing and you follow the appropriate rules and behaviors and processes that go with this. Now, with that, I know a lot of consumers don't necessarily like to follow all of that. They just want to go see the house. And unfortunately, that's really going to be more enforced that can't be the case, that we're going to need to have buyer's agency, pre-qualification, everything lined up and detailed ahead of time, because honestly, it's really risky to just go out there and show a home and have no agency, no pre-qualification to a complete stranger. And then you're literally risking your life. Like, there are cases of realtors who have died from being murdered in these type of situations where people target agents who are willing to just run out and show a house without having any type of a screening or filtering process for who they're showing to, who they are. It's gotten better with some of the background checks and things we can do to protect ourselves as realtors. But ultimately, that process of, I just want to go see the house, one, isn't really safe, and they're really cracking down on that process. And then like the third part about it is like, it's really not a winning strategy anymore. Because what you've seen is house go on the market and it'll go under contract 2 hours later. That's because the conversation has been had with an agent much beforehand, with the buyer's agency set up in place in the terms of that arrangement, the pre-qualification letter and financing in place in the terms of that arrangement. And then when the right house pops up, they're willing to go look at it right away, put it under contract, because they did all the due diligence ahead of time and they were serious about being a solid client, as opposed to just being a consumer who wants to be a looky-loo, dreaming about houses, looking at houses. And so a lot of that process and that practice is starting to get cracked down on, not just for realtor safety, but also for the consumer safety, just how loose and irresponsible that practice is on everything. So with that, we're going to have a lot of forms and disclosure changes, adding in specific verbiage stating brokerage fees are not set by law and fully negotiable, detailing out commission percentages ahead of time. That's literally just came out today on April 1st. So we know a better way to operate with our clients and to advise them on everything. Inspections are more thoroughly detailed out for options, well and septic included. Like I mentioned, showing homes without agency ahead of time is really a non-negotiable thing at this point. It always was a situation where you're supposed to have an agency ahead of time, but a lot of agents, a lot of realtors were very loose around this practice and were very casual, very like lackadaisical, and just wouldn't even approach this situation, because I get it. Like, the consumer's scared of signing paperwork. They're scared of going through the legal process because they're not sure if they can trust you. You just met this person, they just met you, and it can be a cold, awkward situation depending on how well your agent is able to handle that situation, and ultimately the consumer and the client like coming through in this situation. So and the other piece of it is buyer's cost estimate, seller's net estimates are going to be even more critical going forward. You know, I always kind of looked at this from the consumer side, from the owner side, because I've owned like 23 houses now and sold them all. And so I've always looked at this from the standpoint of somebody looking to sell a house, not necessarily like an agent. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, what is the client, what does the consumer want from us? How can we provide service options that are better than what were there before? Because ultimately, like, I would flip a house and I would need to get it sold, and I would hire an agent, but I wasn't really satisfied with their services because they weren't really doing much, even though they can and they should. Is what I got into this industry for, was to provide a better service level to the consumer, and also obviously for myself. And so I had to go learn marketing, I had to go learn sales, I had to go learn negotiation, I had to go learn people. Like, I had to go learn all of these skills in addition to my real estate license, in order to provide the service and the result that I was wanting, but ultimately a lot of other people were wanting as well. And a lot of that would be the breakdown of, like, as a buyer looking to buy a house, what are all my costs I'm going to expect? As a seller looking to sell a house, what are all my costs I'm going to expect? And breaking those things down, being thorough, being detailed, having it documented, explained, signed, like all of that is a professional, high level, good service that leads to happy clients, that leads to them buying a house, selling a house smartly, profitably. And that doesn't necessarily mean just beating up commissions left and right on everything. Because if you look at some of the commission structures around Wichita, the highest in the market I've seen is McCurdy at 10% with their buyer's premium, on their auctions. So that's something you want to account for as well. Some of the lowest I've seen some flat fee brokerages or people that will just throw it on MLS for $100 or $200 and take some phone pictures maybe, but then you can never hear from them. You have no idea what's going on, and you really get a lackluster, limited amount of service. So the amount of variable service options will increase, but you kind of get what you pay for on everything. So in a lot of ways, it makes it more complex, more complicated. The demand's not going anywhere as far as people wanting to buy houses, sellers wanting to sell houses. Being an agent isn't so easy anymore. I will definitely say that the level of complexity, complication, difficulty of all this has gone up. But if you got into the industry to just make easy, big money, like that's where I think there's a disconnect, is that being a real estate is anything but that. And we have such a low barrier to entry. That kind of is where I think this class action lawsuit came from. But ultimately in Kansas, I think the people that are going to get hurt the most are VA and low income, low cash buyers will be hurt the most by this potentially. That's if the seller decides not to offer buyer's agent compensation for that. The other side of this is everything's negotiable. So if we want to offer on a house where the seller's not saying, I'm willing to pay for your commission, we can offer saying that part of the terms of the contract is you pay a buyer's agent commission of X amount, whatever that is. Previously, we weren't really allowed to do that. So a lot of this comes down to when you're a good agent and you just want to serve your people and help them out. It's like, let us know what the rules are so that we can know how to operate within this, and so that we can best serve our people, fully disclose what's going on, and work out a deal in the situation. So the ones that are negotiators, deal makers, creative deal structures, people that really look to provide solutions that work for everyone, and we have to run a profitable business. We can't do things for free, and we have to run a fair, profitable business with all this. So figuring out a way that can work on all of that, it's going to be a lot more of those type of situations on every single house, every single deal, every single situation. And you really can't provide generalized statements or generalized service. And it's kind of the way it's always been, is that generalists usually don't get paid that much, and specialists really get paid well because they provide a very specialized niche service that serves the client, serves the community, serves the market in a high level way. And that's why they make the money they make. It's not easy money just because you see the big settlement statement check that doesn't entirely net go to them. You got to take out all the expenses, you got to take out all the taxes, you got to take out the brokerage fees, and if there's any team structure of what your agent actually makes. And when you really break it down, the average agent makes, I think, like 40,000 a year. So we really don't make as much money as everyone thinks we do. It's definitely a labor of love with everything, and doing it for people and for the right reasons, at least the ones that make it long term. The ones that are just completely money hungry and motivated, I can't necessarily speak for them. And I think, and we'll see with everything, because it's still kind of speculative what's going to happen as far as how the consumers react, how the general public acts, and what people decide to do. Because it's always been a choice for the seller to offer no commission for the buyer's agents. It's a terrible marketing and sales strategy, but it's always been a choice. Because during COVID, a lot of builders nationwide started to do this, not offering buyer's agents commissions. They're like, the buyer's going to want to buy the house anyway. And in some ways that was true. But then when the market shifted and it got hard and the houses weren't selling themselves, which is a common misnomer that people say, is that houses sell themselves. Like, well, if they did, then why aren't they selling right now? And there's a limited inventory. People move houses. People move the money. You move the people. The house sells. And that's where there should be an offer of compensation from the buyer's agent who is bringing the buyer, who has the money, which is where the commission is coming from. The commission is coming from either the buyer's money or the buyer's financing that the seller gets, that then pays out to the listing agent and the buyer's agent. So this idea that the seller is paying for it is such a convoluted thing when you think about it, because without the buyer buying the house, nothing transacts, nothing happens. And there's been kind of this old stigma of how important the seller is and how important the listing agent is. And that's true to an extent to bring it to the market, but without the buyer and without the buyer's agent, this deal doesn't consummate, this transaction doesn't happen. And so there's a fair, healthy, mutual relationship that goes on here. And if you cut off all of those buyers agents and all of those buyers that are doing that, like you're really limiting yourself to sell your house on it all. So this idea of houses sell themselves, and if I just put it on the market, like buyers will just come to me, like we're really seeing that's not really the case on everything. So that's a little bit long-winded on it all. Hopefully that at least provides you some direction on what's going on with this, how to handle it. You know, we have unique creative strategies that we're using to work around a lot of these things when it comes to agencies and the hesitations people have. Same thing with commissions and negotiations. We're very creative, progressive, forward-thinking type of people, and we're always aiming to meet the needs of the market and provide solutions for that. We have some in place already. We'd be happy to discuss them with you. Some of them are proprietary, some of them we'll tell you about out there, but this is where different agencies have different things that they can do for you. And some of them we will share, and some of them it's our competitive intelligence that you know, we came up with. That's a strategy that we have that no one else has. So if you'd like to discuss some of those different strategies, some of those variable options that we have, you know, we're very creative, we're very custom in what we do, and everything's negotiable in life, and you get in life what you negotiate, not necessarily what you tolerate or you deserve. But I'd be more than happy to discuss this with you on a personal level, on a case-by-case level, and really just have a calm, comfortable conversation around this. I think where it gets out of hand is where it gets real emotional, it gets real dramatic, and we kind of lose our reason and our logic in order to sort through this thing because it's stressful and it's emotional. And that's where the importance of documents and disclosures agreed on and signed is important for all parties involved, including the agent, so that there can't be any he said, she said after the fact, is that whatever is signed and documented is what is final on everything. Not necessarily what the verbal discussion was, not necessarily what we thought was said or what's going on. It's whatever is documented and signed is what actually is final. So that's being a lot more enforced, a lot more strict. Ultimately, will enhance the professionalism of our industry. In a lot of ways, this is a very, very good thing for good agents and for good clients, good consumers. And honestly, we're excited for it. We're here for it. So hopefully this helps you understand where things are at and how it affects you. We're going to continue to navigate this thing with love and leadership, and I appreciate watching as always. If I can help you out with anything, follow the links below, check out some of the other videos on Wichita and real estate and everything goes with that. And we'll hopefully talk to you guys soon. See ya.